fabulous lineup today of amazing women who've given up their time to speak. On the stage, we're just about to start. We're going to have Anne-Marie Ward, brilliant, was here last year, and she's come back. We've got Linda Thompson, who I have been after since the first time I heard her. She is awesome. And we have got Esther from Nordic Model, who do so much work for us. Right, I don't think there's much else. I'm Ali. And we do this because we wanted to give something back to all the women that do stuff in Scotland. Everybody that's put a sticker up, if you put a slate up, if you've just said, no, I'm not taking this anymore, this is for you. So please join in. It's the women that come to Alloa that make the magic happen. So please remember, you are the most important people in this room, and you're the most important people out there. You will make a difference. So please join in, everybody. And I would now like to hand over to the amazing Anne-Marie Ward.
Gosh, thank you so much, Ali. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. What an honour and a privilege it is to be asked here today to contribute and to be on the stage and, you know, just to have your ears for 15 minutes. Thank you so much to everybody that's put in the hard work to make it happen today. Particularly, I know it's been in the planning all year, so thank you. I can't believe that you've asked me back. Today I'm going to talk a wee bit about, and I'd love to tell you a wee bit about my story, but I want to talk to you more so about why it's important that women have single-sex spaces and when they're trying to recover from anything or just trying to heal from anything, and obviously my expertise is in addiction. So my name is Anne-Marie Ward. I'm a person in long-term recovery. For me, that means that I haven't used alcohol or other drugs for 27 years, almost 28. Now, I use that phrase quite specifically, alcohol and other drugs, because we forget that alcohol's a drug. At the end of my using, I was 25 years old, I was completely functioning, I was using smack and crack almost on a daily basis, and I had 3 jobs. So people keep telling me, oh, you're not a typical addict. Well, actually, I was surrounded by people like me, and I am still surrounded by people like me, people in recovery, who were completely functioning and who weren't your sort of, you know, the canary in the mine type addict that we see running around, trying to score a tenner bag, emaciated, completely desperate. Those are the canaries in the mine. You know, for me, there's a real problem. There's a spiritual and moral malaise that currently, you know, is part of our major zeitgeist. It's part of our society, and people are continually trying to fix themselves from that. Now, why do I mention the spiritual and moral malaise? Well, hopefully this will, I've made some very brief notes this morning, so bear with me. So the concept of a spiritual malaise suggests a deeper systemic harm that extends beyond individual suffering, and it weakens society's ability to stand in solidarity and care for one another. And when women experience trauma, in particular, particularly abuse, addiction and other systemic neglect, their pain does not exist in isolation. It echoes through families, communities, institutions, and it shapes the broader social structures and relationships. So why is it important then for us to have single-sex spaces? Because women who are struggling with addiction often carry the weight of trauma histories, with physical and sexual abuse frequently at the root of our struggles. Now, there's barely a woman in recovery that I know that hasn't suffered some form of sexual or physical abuse. So this trauma is compounded obviously by stigma, and it creates cycles of silence and societal neglect. Addressing these realities requires treatment models, particularly that consider the unique experiences of women rather than imposing a one-size-fits-all solutions that fails to, you know, meet our sex-specific needs. So particularly around safe spaces for healing. Women-only environments provide a necessary refuge from male-dominated spaces where many have experienced harm, and these spaces allow for open communication, deeper therapeutic engagement, and the ability to process trauma without fear or re-traumatisation. We know in the single-sex rehabs that women do much better because they're not, they're not getting re-traumatised and they're not in that dynamic. But yet I think we've got one single-sex rehab in the whole of the UK. Yeah. So, but the research is unequivocal. We do much better in single-sex spaces. Anyway, our empowerment and our self-worth. So recovery is not just about abstinence. It has been for me, about not using alcohol and other drugs, but it's about reclaiming our dignity, autonomy, self-worth. I spoke here last year and I told you that when I first got clean, when you walked into Fraser's or Debenhams, those makeup counters, those lovely women's products, and I know there's a lot of feminists in the room, and they might disagree with me here, but my worth was so low that I thought those things were for real women. I had no value. My own personal story was I was sexually and physically abused as a child, so it took me a very long time to stop self-harming when I got into recovery. And to recognise my own worth and being able to do that with other women was absolutely vital. Being part of women's groups, women's healing projects was completely central to me building that self-worth. It was other women who nurtured me and who loved me. And I could not, and I got clean when I was 25, and I wasn't able to treat men without some form of contempt until I was in my early 40s. So the resentment that I had towards men was really, really, really bad, And, who could blame me? I'm sure many of us still have it. In fact, I don't, thank God. And I mean that, thank God. So raising our self-worth is so important to our healing. Breaking the cycles of stigma and shame. Obviously, women battling addiction, especially mothers, face intense societal judgment. The stigma often prevents them even from asking for help in the first place, reinforcing isolation, deepening the cycles of addiction themselves, and sex-specific treatment approaches dismantles these barriers, creating supportive spaces where women can heal without the fear of condemnation. We do currently have 2 family rehabs, one just opened last week in Aberdeen, both run by Phoenix Futures, one down in Saltcoats. So if you've got any women who have still got their children, they're not single sex, so there can be men in there as well with their children. But they're family-specific rehabs, so we do have 2, and I like to say that my organisation fought like fuck to get those organisations, and we did. So the relational nature of the recovery and the healing process is that women tend to heal through relationship and connection. So everything I'm saying here is completely evidence-based. I'm not just making this up. There's a whole load of literature that backs this up. Recovery models that prioritise communal healing rather than individualistic and punitive approaches are more effective in fostering long-term recovery. And these programmes, sex-specific for women, provide a foundation of mutual support, encouraging women to rebuild trust and the ability to go on and have stable, fulfilling, purposeful lives. And they can also address the obvious co-occurring disorders. And many women struggle with addiction who obviously experience PTSD, depression, anxiety, and treating addiction in isolation without addressing these co-occurring disorders is ineffective. Sex-specific treatment ensures a holistic approach that acknowledges and treats these interconnected challenges. But I'm going to sort of just come to this, why am I talking about a spiritual and moral malaise here? Because the moral and the spiritual malaise at play is not just about addiction or trauma, it's about how society consistently fails to protect its most vulnerable, therefore eroding its own foundation of solidarity. The dismissal of women's trauma histories, the perpetuation of stigma, and the inadequacy of traditional treatment models all contribute to a broader disintegration of communal care for women. And healing women means healing society. I can't say that loudly enough. When women are given the space, support, and resources that they need to recover, they are more likely to reintegrate into their families, their communities, as active and empowered members of those communities. A society that invests in sex-specific, trauma-informed recovery recognises the interconnectedness of human suffering and the urgent need for collective healing. And I think that collective healing, again, if you think about the lassie who is, or the woman who is suffering from addiction, you can see her on any high street, you can see her, you know, she's visible there. But think about her, but think about all the other women like me who were functioning, who were putting a face on, literally putting a face on, to try and fit into a society that was, and my God, I can't even imagine what it's like now for young women at 25 trying to fit into, you know, what society's throwing at them through pornography, through so-called sex work. We're going to hear a wee bit about that. Sex work, Jesus Christ. You know, just, yeah. Sorry, I feel like I've just shouted at you. We can and do recover if we get the right help, and getting the right help often means having women nurture us. It was for me, it was a vital part of my recovery to be surrounded by women who had recovered and who had healed from all the trauma that I had healed from. I've got 5 minutes, right, I can relax. Yeah, so I'll maybe try and just talk a wee bit from my heart then, rather than my head. You know, without the women's groups that I was a member of, you know, my whole recovery, I wouldn't be here today. You know, I had to have those places where I knew that I was safe. You know, and I know that these terms have been so warped, safe spaces, you know, in the last few years. You know, going into rooms where I knew I wasn't going to be judged. I mean, there was a point in my recovery, I was probably about 10 years clean and sober, right, where I noticed that, you know, the contempt that I spoke about earlier, you know, and it's not something that I want to, you know, like, I'm not proud to admit that. You know, I was very frightened that if a man looked at me, even in the supermarket, I was contemptuous. You know, if I felt a man looking at me in my profession. So I was never confident about being an attractive woman. It always felt like a vulnerability to me. I always felt unsafe. And until, you know, but a big part of my healing was letting go and actually acknowledging that, you know, that for me that attractiveness was nothing to do with, you know, what I looked like. It was about my spirit. It was about my, you know, my willingness to be open, my willingness to love, my willingness to be accepted. And all those things came from other women. It was other women that taught me all that. And they also taught me